Welcome to the Pocket MBA, the definitive shortcut to mastering the organizational landscape. If you've spent any time in business school, on a trading floor, or, frankly, in any boardroom, you know the curriculum tends to prioritize the measurables.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about financial modeling, valuation, optimization,
hmm
these technical skills that give you a very comforting sense of control.
But here's the rather uncomfortable truth. Those skills, they are your entry ticket. They get you in the door, they keep the lights on, but they don't determine your trajectory.
Not at all. It's the mastery of power dynamics, what you could call the political currency, that truly determines if you survive, if you advance, and if you can actually execute your vision within any complex organization. We are talking about power in professional relationships.
Precisely. And today we're taking a deep, unromantic, and, well, a frankly ruthless look at how power is acquired, held, and lost. Our mission is to transform your understanding of organizational life.
And we had to start with the core idea that power is way more complex than just simple coercion.
Yes, to set the stage, we need to appreciate its many dimensions. It's not just about who can fire whom.
Right. If we look at the theoretical groundwork from, say, Michael Barnett and Raymond Duval, they argue that power goes way beyond just one person controlling another to do something they wouldn't otherwise do.
And they break this down by looking at two dimensions. The first is whether power works through a direct sort of hands-on interaction or a more diffuse social constitution.
Correct. And when you intersect those two dimensions, you get four fundamental types of power. And for any aspiring leader, you have to recognize all four of them are at play all the time in a corporate environment.
Right, let's walk through those four then, starting with the simplest, which I assume is the direct interaction.
That's it. So if power works through a direct, specific, interaction, we get what they call compulsory power.
Compulsory power. So this is the classic power over someone, the CEO telling a subordinate what to do.
Exactly. Or a vendor threatening to cut off your supply unless you pay immediately. It's direct, it's control, and it's really easy to spot.
But what if that power is still working through an interaction, but it's more indirect or diffuse?
Then you get institutional power. And this is the power that's embedded in the rules, in the policies, in all the standard operating procedures that, constrain or enable what you do.
So often without a single individual actually pulling the strings.
That's the key. Think about the complex HR processes that govern promotions, or even the unwritten rules of the budgeting cycle. No single person is pulling the lever, but the institution itself, the structure, is shaping your actions.
That's a subtle but really crucial difference. Institutional power, then, is the power of the bureaucracy, of the org chart itself.
Precisely. Now let's look at that second dimension, power working through social constitution. This is about shaping who the actors even are and what they believe is possible.
And if that's specific.
Then we have structural power. This defines your capacities and your interests just based on your position. The classic example is the master-slave relationship. But in business, think of the capital-labor relationship.
Or even line manager versus a staff consultant. Your fundamental position in the structure shapes what you're able to do.
And finally, when power works through diffuse social constitution, we get productive power. This is the most abstract, but you could argue it's the most potent.
Okay, so how does productive power actually show up in an organization?
It's in the language we use. The whole discourse around who gets labeled a leader or what it means to have high potential, it shapes our understanding of gender roles at work or even what are considered acceptable levels of ambition.
So it basically produces the reality that everyone accepts.
And your own self-perception within that reality. Understanding this distinction, that power isn't just a lever you pull, but it's the environment you breathe and the very identity you have that's foundational.
That is a brilliant distillation. Power is clearly so multifaceted. Now, shifting from the nature of power to the specific tactics people use, Falbo and Pepler provided a really useful taxonomy of influence strategies.
They did. And even though their original research was on intimate relationships, the dimensions they identified translate perfectly to professional life.
What were they?
They identified two key dimensions. The first one is directness, which is pretty intuitive. It runs from highly direct strategies, like just flat out asking for something, to highly indirect ones.
Like hinting or joking about it.
Right, or trying to put the other person in a good mood before you make the request. The whole buttering up process
And the second dimension.
is bilaterality. Does the strategy actually require interaction with the target? Persuasion, negotiation, reasoning, those are all bilateral. They require the other party to engage.
Whereas a unilateral strategy is something you can just do on your own.
Exactly. Things like withdrawal, evasion, or laissez-faire.
Yeah.
Just letting the situation unfold without your input or, just doing what you want anyway and dealing with the fallout later.
What's fascinating here, and what really speaks to the confidence of power, is their main finding.
Yeah, this is key. Individuals who perceive themselves as having greater power were way more likely to use bilateral and direct strategies.
They bargained openly. They stated their requests clearly.
And critically, experts in that study saw those strategies as good ones linked to greater relationship satisfaction. In a professional context, that translates to more transparent, healthier organizational relationships.
So if you feel secure in your power, you'll negotiate openly. But if you feel weak or you're expecting resistance, you resort to indirect moves.
Hints, evasion, passive aggression. It's the difference between asking for a budget increase with a spreadsheet full of data versus just overspending and hoping no one notices until it's too late.
Right. Now, to round out this introduction, let's quickly touch on 3 tactical categories for influence from Uckel and Gardner. These are things you'll use daily, whether you're dealing with peers, superiors, or your own team.
The first one is what they call legitimating tactics.
This is when you establish your authority or your right to make a request, isn't it? By, say, referencing the company handbook or some standard practice.
That's it. Citing the Q3 planning cycle agreement to justify why you need a new deliverable from someone. It's most effective when you're managing down with subordinates because the organization's rules make the request feel less personal.
And the second category is a bit harder.
Pressure tactics. This is the enforcement side. Threats, warnings, assertive behavior, checking in constantly to make sure something is being done.
This is the hammer, and I'm assuming it's also used primarily downwards.
Almost exclusively. You use it on subordinates where the power difference is already clear and you have credible threats, like disciplinary action. Trying to use pressure tactics on your boss is usually not a good career move.
And third, the more collaborative approach.
Coalition tactics. This is where you enlist the help of others to persuade your target. You build a group, you find an ally, you get a majority.
And this is incredibly versatile. You can use it upwards against a superior, like lobbying the board.
Or laterally, to build consensus with other department heads. It's often the go-to strategy when you don't have that formal compulsory power.
These frameworks are absolutely crucial for understanding the environment. But now we pivot. We move to the raw, practical, and often politically charged reality of actually acquiring and using influence, drawing from the definitive insights in Jeffrey Pfeffer's seminal work, Power, why some people have it and others don't.
Okay, this is where we stop talking about how the world should work and we start analyzing how it actually works. The mission for the Pocket MBA today is to really internalize Pfeffer's core view. If you want to succeed and survive, mastering the political game is simply not negotiable.
So let's unpack Pfeffer's core thesis. It really is a necessary cold shower for anyone coming out of a meritocratic academic environment. He argues that your success is not guaranteed by technical competence or dedication alone.
Not even close. It requires genuine political savvy, and he argues that actively seeking power isn't greedy, it's just an organizational survival skill.
This immediately forces us to see an organization as a competitive, often zero-sum political arena. And Pfeffer's first big demolition job is on myth number 1. Performance will save you.
Yeah, he just demonstrates over and over that the link between high performance and positive career outcomes, promotions, retention, salary, is surprisingly weak.
The case studies he uses are just so compelling because they show political calculations completely overriding obvious operational success. Let's look at Ken Kaiser at the Veterans Health Administration, the VHA.
Kaiser was a genuine turnaround artist. I mean, he instituted a nationwide electronic medical record system, he revolutionized care standards, and he vastly increased the efficiency and the reputation of the VHA. He turned it into a model health system.
This was a stellar, quantifiable performance in a massive government bureaucracy. And yet, despite this spectacular turnaround, he was pushed out in 1999.
Right. And it wasn't because his clinical metrics slipped or because the finances went bad. He lost his job because of stiff congressional opposition. Kaiser, as part of his efficiency drive, wanted to close VHA hospitals in certain key congressional districts. He was right on the metrics, but he made politically powerful enemies. Politics trumped performance. It's a brutal illustration that if you antagonize the wrong people, no amount of success is going to save you.
And this same dynamic plays out at the highest levels of the private sector. Jamie Dimon, who of course became one of the most powerful men in finance, was ultimately forced out of Citibank.
And it wasn't about his performance. It was because of a deep political and, frankly, emotional tussle with Jessica Weil, who was the daughter of his mentor, Sandy Weil. It was about internal family dynamics and political alignment at the absolute top.
It's the same story with the founders of Home Depot, Arthur Blank and Bernard Marcus. They were famously fired from their previous company, Handy Dan.
Simply because their boss, who also owned a controlling stake, just didn't like them. He felt insecure, so they had to be eliminated. The common denominator in all these cases is that commitment to an individual rests on subjective political calculations, not objective output.
Which really emphasizes this pervasive influence of what Pfeffer calls the boss factor. Your performance evaluations, your job retention, they're incredibly sensitive to just keeping your supervisor happy.
And this isn't just an anecdote. The bias is scientifically supported. There's a study by David Scorman that is just startling. He found that supervisors who simply favored hiring a particular employee, meaning they went to bat for that person to be brought on board, were strongly correlated with giving that same employee higher subsequent performance evaluations.
Regardless of their actual measured output.
Regardless of their actual output, it's a powerful self-confirming prophecy. If I, as a manager, champion your hire, my psychological need is to see you succeed to justify my initial political investment. My commitment to you can literally outweigh the objective facts of your work.
And this weak link between performance and staying in your job persists even at the CEO level, where you'd think objective metrics would be most scrutinized.
Right. Research found that even CEOs who presided over 3 straight years of catastrophic poor performance, including driving their firms into bankruptcy, still had a 50% chance of keeping their jobs.
A 50% chance of keeping the job after leading the company into bankruptcy. That is astounding.
And the reason they stayed wasn't a sudden turnaround, it was their power base. If the CEO had a lot of personal ownership, or if the board was filled with insiders who reported to the CEO, they kept their job. The lesson is brutal. Performance is necessary, but political security is sufficient for survival.
Which brings us to the psychological hurdle most of us face. Myth number 2, the belief in a just world. Pfeffer calls this a fundamental delusion in an organizational context.
And this comes from Melvin Lerner's just world hypothesis. The idea is that we as humans have this deep fundamental need for the world to be predictable, controllable, and fair.
And to maintain that psychological comfort, we subconsciously adopt this belief that people get what they deserve. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people.
And the moment you carry that belief into an organization, it actively undermines your ability to acquire power in 2 very specific ways.
How so?
Well, first, it hinders learning. If you see a successful colleague using ruthless political tactics that you personally dislike, maybe they're abrasive or they exaggerate their accomplishments, the just world believer just dismisses them. They think, oh, they'll get what's coming to them eventually.
So they don't analyze why those tactics are working.
Exactly. The story of Jim Walker at Nomura Securities is a perfect cautionary tale. He built a hugely successful Asian equity operation based purely on merit and technical results. But when he faced internal rivals and political opposition, he failed to adapt. He truly believed his merit would win out in the end.
He didn't build alliances, he didn't fight on the political battlefield.
And as a result, he lost control of his operation and was forced out. The second major pitfall of this belief is that it anesthetizes proactivity.
Meaning, if you think the world is just, you don't feel the need to act.
Why would you? Why bother expending massive effort building political alliances or managing your image if you truly believe that just doing good work will be enough? You just wait for the system to reward you fairly, which leaves you completely vulnerable when the political knives come out.
And this works in reverse, too. The Totter stigmatization and justification effect. If someone is richly rewarded, observers automatically assign positive virtues to them.
Right. They must be a genius. They must be the hardest worker. We do this to justify their reward and maintain our belief that the world is fair. If a successful person is clearly abrasive or dishonest, our brain has 2 choices.
Either the world is unfair, which is psychologically unsettling.
Or we retroactively decide the person must possess some hidden compensatory virtues that justify their success. It's just cognitive dissonance reduction in full effect.
Now for the third myth. Beware of the leadership literature. This is where Pfeffer takes direct aim at that vast industry of self-help and leadership books.
He basically cautions that most of the standard advice, be authentic, be modest, be truthful, listen well, is based on how people wish the world operated, not on empirical reality.
There's a positive spin at play. Those who win get to write the history.
Totally. Once a leader is successful, others selectively remember or they even impute positive qualities that may never have existed. This creates a feedback loop that reinforces the myth that only good leaders can win.
And you must be skeptical of the source material itself. Pfeffer advises relying on rigorous social science research and your own objective observation, not on self-serving autobiographies.
The data backs up that skepticism. One academic study found that substantial misstatements existed on over 40% of executive resumes.
40%.
Yeah. And if people are fabricating verifiable facts, just imagine the distortion they apply to their own behavior and character on the path to the top. The key takeaway here is to just immediately abandon the psychological crutch of the just world belief. Accept that your organization is a competitive arena and performance is just the entry ticket. Political skill is what buys you the seat at the table and keeps you there.
Right. So if pure meritocracy is a myth, what are the personal qualities that actually provide genuine leverage and influence? Pfeffer is quite clear that these qualities are not innate gifts.
No, not at all. He quotes the choreographer Twyla Tharp, who said, "The best creativity is the result of habit and hard work. Power attributes are learned, and they are developed."
And the first, and perhaps most critical, is sheer energy and endurance.
This is so important. The acquisition and maintenance of power is profoundly laborious, and you just have to have the capacity for it.
For a start, energy is a catalyst. It's contagious, it inspires effort in others, which is vital for execution. Lyndon Johnson was legendary for working his aides relentlessly.
But, and this is the crucial part, he worked alongside them with equal, almost terrifying ferocity. And because of that, he commanded loyalty and output.
Secondly, pure endurance provides for the necessary laborious preparation that's required for mastery.
Right. Simonton's research on genius found that exceptional accomplishment is overwhelmingly linked to the sheer number of hours devoted to practice and knowledge acquisition. This idea of innate, effortless genius just dissolves when you look closer. It's really thousands of hours of effort.
And thirdly, just expending high energy signals a serious degree of commitment, which gets you noticed, and it signals loyalty, both of which are critical for getting promoted.
And to help cultivate this, the practice of structured self-reflection is vital. Pfeffer uses the example of Joe Beneducci.
What did he do?
Beneducci carried a small notebook everywhere, and after every significant meeting, he would meticulously make notes: who said what went well, what surprised him, and what the final outcome was.
So it's a simple, disciplined act.
But it fosters reflection. It allows you to calibrate your political radar and internalize insights about human interaction, which is absolutely necessary to develop political acumen over time.
Next, you have to master the projection of confidence and dominance. Peter Ueberroth, who organized the hugely successful 1984 LA Olympics, had a great maxim for this.
Yeah, he said, authority is 20% given, 80% taken.
Huh.
If you don't act like you own the room, no one else is going to believe you do.
And this means projecting assurance even when you feel uncertain.
Exactly. Look at the example of Dr. Frances Conley, a neurosurgeon. When she was discussing a complex case with her surgical trainees, she was open about her uncertainty, she'd solicit their input, but the second she faced the patient, she instantly switched her demeanor to one of calm, decisive authority.
Why the immediate switch?
She believed her confident presentation had a genuine placebo effect on the patient. It was crucial for their willingness to trust the hospital and the surgical team. In high-stakes environments, projecting mastery is often more important than sharing your internal doubt.
The power of presentation cannot be overstated. We saw this during the Iran-Contra hearings. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North testified wearing his crisp, ribbon-decorated uniform, asserting control.
Yeah, he used these declarative phrases like "I told" or "I caused." It signaled agency and control. He just looked righteous and powerful.
And you contrast that with Donald Kennedy, the Stanford University president, who was embroiled in a scandal over indirect costs.
Kennedy appeared embarrassed. He used these long, convoluted sentences. He answered questions indirectly. His weak, hesitant presentation made him look guilty, even though the government eventually found no basis for its claims. The perception of control or guilt is often manufactured purely by demeanor and language.
Now, this is where it gets psychologically aggressive, the link between anger and status.
Yeah, the social psychologist Larissa Titans did some fascinating research here. It suggests that expressing anger in negative situations often makes people appear more dominant, stronger, and more competent.
And that's a function of expectation.
It is. People expect high-status individuals to feel justified anger in bad situations, whereas they expect low-status individuals to feel sadness or fear or guilt. So expressing anger actually aligns with the expectation of dominance, which is a powerful signal.
But there is a necessary caveat here regarding gender, which Pfeffer is careful to include.
Yes. While forceful anger can be generally effective, some studies show that women might receive less status when expressing anger, or they might unconsciously express it in submissive ways, like raising their voice pitch, which undermines the signal of dominance. The key is assertive, controlled expression, whether you're male or female.
Let's move to a softer form of power used for strategic gain: empathy and conflict tolerance.
Empathy in the power context isn't about being kind. It's a strategic asset for negotiation. It means truly understanding your opponent's core interest so you can find an angle for cooperation, or, more often, for leverage.
The Laura Esserman example at UCSF is a textbook case.
It is. Esserman was trying to drive major changes in breast cancer care. She had launched a mobile mammography van, but this project was drawing fierce opposition for the department chair and the CFO. They were worried about the cost and the impact on the surgical department's budget.
She realized she was so focused on doing the right thing, the van, that she was alienating powerful people she needed.
So she exercised strategic empathy. She realized the van was actually peripheral to her larger core agenda. By shutting down the van project, she conceded a low-stakes battle, which immediately earned her critical political support from the chair and the CFO. She understood their core interests, budget, control, and she temporarily accommodated them.
That said, strategic toughness is equally vital. Pfeffer provides examples that show conflict tolerance and intimidation are highly effective, even in cultures known for politeness.
Look at Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's legendary prime minister. He was often described as impatient, rude, and contemptuous of his opponents. But that conflict tolerance allowed him to consolidate power ruthlessly by taking on entrenched interests.
Or in Japan, where conformity is paramount, Katsuchi Kawamata rose to lead Nissan, despite having no prior industry experience, through these unexpected, coarse displays of toughness.
One manager observed that his behavior was a deliberate power play. It signaled that what interested them, politeness, custom didn't have to interest him, but what interested him absolutely had to interest them. Intimidation just redefined the terms of engagement.
Finally, we need to put intelligence reevaluated into perspective.
Yes. Intelligence is the single best predictor of individual job performance, but its correlation with ultimate career success and income is statistically small. It explains only about 4% of the variation in income.
Only 4%. That really undercuts the entire premise of elite education to some extent.
And more importantly, extreme brilliance can actually become a liability. Too much intelligence often correlates with arrogance, overconfidence, and insensitivity to others' feelings. These traits cause brilliant people to think they can solve every problem alone, so they bypass the crucial coalition building and empathy required to acquire and maintain organizational power. You end up alienating the very allies you need.
Right. So, having cultivated these necessary personal attributes, the next strategic calculation involves geography. Choosing your starting point, choosing the right launch pad is paramount.
Absolutely. The power of a department directly correlates with your salary growth and your promotion rate. Power is not distributed evenly across an org chart.
The path to the CEO position at AT&T, for example, ran almost exclusively through the Illinois Bell subsidiary for decades.
And at Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, we saw a major power shift. It moved perceptibly from the engineers who built the infrastructure to the lawyers and finance professionals. By 1980, attorneys held 18 of the most senior positions, compared to just 3 in 1950.
And that shift simply reflects the changing nature of the critical organizational problem. When PG&E was building out its infrastructure, the engineers were indispensable.
But once the environment became dominated by regulation, rate setting, and liability, the lawyers and the financial experts became the most critical function. The Berkeley sociologist Neil Fligstein developed a powerful model showing exactly this. The background of corporate leaders shifts based on the critical organizational need of the era.
That historical trajectory moved from entrepreneurs early in the 20th century to manufacturing and production experts.
Then to marketing and sales experts in the 20s and 30s when mass consumption and brand building became key.
And then, starting in the 1960s, the ascendancy of finance.
Right, which reflects the rising power of capital markets, the focus on shareholder value, and the critical need to manage complex financial controls and acquisitions.
So understanding which function is solving the current critical organizational problem is highly predictive of where the power resides. And this explains some of these seemingly unexpected paths to power.
Take Zia Yusuf at SAP. SAP is a quintessential high-tech, engineering-dominated company. Yet Yusuf, whose background was in finance and strategy, rose rapidly to executive vice president. Why?
Because the problem SAP was tackling wasn't core engineering. They were already brilliant at that.
Exactly. The critical problem was scaling effectively to small and mid-sized enterprises. That's a strategic, marketing, and distribution challenge, not a technical one. Yusuf exploited this shift by identifying the next critical need.
He leveraged his analytical staff position into power by being ahead of the curve.
But there's a caveat. Even Yusuf eventually moved to a revenue-responsible line role. And this underscores the universal rule that resource control is power.
Control over budget, staff, and revenue streams is paramount. Even if you start in a staff role like finance or strategy, you must find a way to control crucial organizational resources to gain real, lasting influence.
But what if you're starting from zero? Pfeffer says making something out of nothing is entirely possible. Power is accumulated incrementally by controlling the resources that others neglect.
The Frank Stanton anecdote at CBS is brilliant here.
It's perfect. Stanton made himself completely indispensable by obsessively compiling and having ready access to information others hadn't bothered to gather, radio program demographics, details on building ownership, anything the senior executives might need on the fly.
He essentially fabricated the appearance of being omniscient.
He did. If he didn't immediately know the answer to an obscure question, he'd scramble behind the scenes to find the data, maybe in the World Almanac, then present the answer as if he'd known it all along. By controlling information, he created leverage and access that far exceeded his job title.
Another powerful tactic is creating a venue, making yourself central by creating the resource base itself. This is the story of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Schwab started in 1971 by organizing a modest meeting called the European Business Forum. He just recognized the value of connection, and that modest start grew into the massive World Economic Forum in Davos.
A centralized meeting place for global elites, media, and business leaders.
By creating that venue, Schwab created a massive resource-based connections, prestige, information, and he gained immense influence just by brokering those connections. Companies paid tens of thousands of dollars just for the privilege of entry. He made himself central by creating the scarcity and the demand for the resource he controlled: access.
Finally, to gain that initial foothold, you often have to disregard caution. You must actively work on standing out and breaking rules.
The cautious aphorism, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, is career poison if you're ambitious. If you just blend into the woodwork, you'll never be noticed for a promotion, regardless of how competent you are. You have to be memorable.
The story of Reginald Lewis, who went on to found TLC Beatrice International, is the epitome of seizing the initiative.
It is. In 1965, he was in a summer program at Harvard Law that explicitly forbade its participants from applying to the school. Lewis hadn't even taken the prerequisite standardized tests.
Yet he met with the professor and the dean and forcefully argued how an association between Reginald Lewis and Harvard Law would be mutually beneficial. He framed his own entry as a strategic advantage for them.
He violated the stated rules, he leveraged bold self-confidence, and he forced his way in. As Malcolm Gladwell argued, underdogs win precisely by choosing not to play by Goliath's established rules. It cuts the stronger party's probability of victory in half because they are completely unprepared for the unorthodox attack.
So if the right attributes and strategic position give you leverage, then building networks as resources is how you transform that leverage into sustained power.
Right. Networking is the conscious building, maintenance, and strategic use of informal relationships to gain access to resources, whether that's information, budget, or political support. And the effort involved is demonstrably worthwhile.
There was a longitudinal study by Wolf and Moser.
Yes, that study confirmed that networking activity positively affects not just your current salary, but also long-term salary growth and overall career satisfaction. It also boosts your salience. You can't be promoted if the right people don't remember you exist.
When cultivating these connections, most people naturally gravitate towards their close colleagues. But Granovetter's classic study proved the unexpected power of weak ties.
Right. Casual acquaintances were often more vital than strong ties for finding new jobs or accessing non-redundant information.
Why is that?
Because your strong ties, your closest friends, they typically move in the same circles. They have the same information you already have. Weak ties, however, bridge you to disparate groups. They provide non-redundant opportunities and critical intelligence that you would otherwise completely miss. You have to cultivate breadth, not just depth.
Power also derives not just from how many people you know, but from your centrality and brokerage position within that network.
Look at Kenji, a nuclear engineer with an MBA working at a large Japanese utility. He had low formal seniority, but he was uniquely positioned. As the only person fluent in both nuclear engineering detail and international business strategy, he became the necessary conduit or broker for information flowing between the technical departments and the global strategy teams.
And because he controlled that information flow, senior managers, despite his low title, constantly had to consult him.
Which gave him influence entirely disproportionate to his formal position.
Moving from the tangible network position to sheer perception, we come to reputation. Image creates reality. First impressions are formed in milliseconds, and they matter immensely.
And those initial impressions are self-reinforcing because of the self-fulfilling prophecy effect. If an interviewer has a powerful first impression of a candidate, they'll engage more positively. They ask questions that allow the candidate to demonstrate competence, which just validates that initial impression.
And this is coupled with biased assimilation, where later, perhaps ambiguous information is reinterpreted to fit the original reputation.
There's a hilarious example of this. The comedian Charlie Veron impersonated a human genomics expert at a conference. The audience, expecting brilliance, interpreted the parts of his talk that made absolutely no sense as reflections of their own inadequacy, not his incompetence. Reputation pre-shapes reality.
Therefore, image construction has to be meticulous and strategic. Pfeffer cites Ryan Liz's account of Barack Obama, who meticulously constructed his political identity in Chicago from the very beginning.
John Brown at BP cultivated his image on 3 specific pillars: legendary intelligence, almost inhuman dedication, and critically, intimidation. You have to define the elements of your reputation to make sure your behavior consistently reinforces them.
And to make that image stick externally, you must be cultivating media. This is the elegant solution to the self-promotion dilemma.
Yes. Having others sing your praises is always far more credible than singing them yourself. Marcelo, a Brazilian CFO, recognized this. He consistently wrote articles, volunteered data, and made himself accessible to journalists who needed content. He built tremendous external credibility, which then enhanced his internal stature.
When opposition inevitably arises, you must focus on overcoming opposition and setbacks. This demands ruthless persistence.
Richard Blum, the chair of the UC Board of Regents, summed up his relationship with the perpetually persistent Laura Esserman this way: "I have learned that when either my wife or Laura asks you to do something, the best answer is, 'Yes, dear,' because even if you say no, sooner or later you're going to do it anyway."
Persistence is vital, but so is fighting strategically. You have to try a little tenderness and leave your opponents a graceful way out.
Right. Willie Brown, when he became Speaker of the California Assembly, was notorious for rewarding his rivals with safe seats in Congress, or the state Senate, rather than exacting some humiliating retribution. This solidified his position by neutralizing his enemies and turning them into vested, albeit less powerful, allies.
You also must advance on multiple fronts. Esserman, realizing she was stalled at UCSF, systematically built powerful national ties with the National Cancer Institute.
She then deployed that national visibility and prestige to apply pressure locally. She turned a local political fight into a national mandate she could enforce back home.
And crucially, seized the initiative.
Lalit Modi, seeking control of the Board of Control for Cricket in India, didn't wait. He ran an overt political campaign, hiring lawyers to pursue allegations against the incumbent president. The incumbent was caught completely unaware by the speed and determination of the attack, which allowed Modi to secure victory quickly before opposition could form. Move first, move fast.
Finally, we have to analyze the costs of power and how it is lost. Holding power changes your behavior, often for the worse, and it creates acute vulnerabilities.
Power leads to what's called approach behavior and diminishing inhibition. It's a tendency to ignore social rules and be less concerned with how others perceive you. This is why a social psychology experiment found that the randomly assigned high-power person was more likely to take a second cookie from the communal plate and chew with their mouth open.
So power leads to overconfidence and a relaxation of social vigilance.
And that overconfidence, when combined with the intense visibility and scrutiny that comes with high office, is a deadly combination. Harry Stonecipher, Boeing CEO, lost his job over a consensual affair. Rudy Crew, the NYC Schools chancellor, faced public scrutiny over petty personal expenses like driving a Mercedes. At a high level, every single choice is monitored and potentially weaponized.
This relentless scrutiny creates intense pressure, which in turn leads to a reluctance to innovate or take necessary risks.
Which is the innovator's dilemma for leaders. The cost of failure under the public spotlight is just too high. It stifles the very dynamism that may have gotten them the job in the first place.
Another key cost is misplaced trust. Power holders become less vigilant because they are so accustomed to obedience and deference.
David Coulter, CEO of Bank of America, fatally trusted Hugh McCall's promises of shared governance during their merger. He failed to rigorously monitor the subsequent power plays and board appointments. He didn't see the consolidation of control until it was too late. McCall controlled the board, and within weeks of the merger closing, Coulter was summarily removed.
The final cost is burnout and vigilance fatigue. Maintaining power requires immense, constant energy.
And if you get tired, you lose focus and you make mistakes. Tony Levitan, co-founder of eGreetings, became tired and burned out. His reduced vigilance meant he failed to fight effectively during a subsequent CEO search, and he allowed himself to be marginalized from the company he started.
If you are exhausted or you lose the will to fight the daily political battles, you quickly become vulnerable and disposable.
Exactly.
So, after this rather pragmatic and perhaps sobering look at organizational reality, what does this all mean for you as you navigate your own professional trajectory?
Well, Pfeffer's roadmap is pretty clear. Abandon the belief in a just world, prioritize political skill, deliberately develop key attributes like energy and confidence, and strategically build diverse networks and resources.
The overarching lesson seems to be that you must look out for yourself because the organization certainly is not looking out for you.
You really shouldn't be overly concerned with how your political behavior affects the organization's moral compass, because the organization itself is operating purely on self-interest.
We saw this with the Venrock Partners, a venture capital firm. Tony Sun, who made his partners billions over 3 decades, was summarily outmaneuvered and ousted when partnership resources tightened.
Or Ray at Unisys, who, despite successful performance, was eliminated in a reduction in force of exactly one person himself, because he just lacked internal political support from HR.
So survival requires complete self-reliance and acute political mastery.
Since organizations are quick to eliminate people during political struggles, especially when the environment is scarce or competitive, mastering power dynamics is essential for your career success and survival, regardless of the company's stated values.
And here is the provocative thought to carry forward with you. Power is a learned skill set that many ambitious people mistakenly avoid, often because they assume it must be inherently morally corrupting or just unpleasant.
But once you achieve proficiency at the power game, it often becomes a source of genuine enjoyment, effectiveness, and satisfaction. Consider testing it in a low-risk environment, like a volunteer committee or a minor internal project.
You might find, as the student Pfeffer sites did, that your efforts don't produce resentment, but rather gratitude from others who are happy to offload the work, the responsibility, and the risk.
Acquiring influence is achievable, it's useful, and the proficiency you gain quickly becomes an indelible, essential part of your professional identity. Go find a low-stakes fight and try it.